Welcome to another edition of our Daily Bread. I'm Messianic Torah, and today this is a special portion, and this is for Chag Ha Matzah. That is the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and so this is my message for 2016-17, and it's called The Bittersweet Taste of Freedom. So, in this year's holy day, Chag Ha Matzah, there's the traditional readings, but I like to do the messages that are basically more topical based on that, because I feel like, some of the traditional readings on the holy days, some of them don't even actually include a lot of the straight text that is used, or they only include part of it and not other parts. So I like to just dig right into the topic. I mean, this is our holy day. This is Chag Ha Matzah, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Now, I'll have to do another video about the difference between Pesach and Chag Ha Matzah, because I know that there's a lot of people out there who are celebrating them as the same day, right? They put Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread together, and so they end up with a 7-day festival instead of an 8-day, which is what I tend to think it is from my study of the scriptures. If we just look at Leviticus 23, you'll see that it clearly talks about Passover on the 14th, and that the 15th is the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and then at that point it says, for 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. That commandment comes after that, so I'm not going to dig into it real deep here, but I will tell you that studying Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread is one of the things that I've spent years on, and that it's tricky, actually. There's certainly some areas where it seems one way, and then when you read other areas, it seems a different way, and then when you read the totality of every verse that's really talking about that, you have to carefully, plus and minus the different points until you come to a conclusion about how you think that we are supposed to celebrate this day. But aside from that, let's just dig right into this. My message is called The Bittersweet Taste of Freedom. And, this word bittersweet is interesting. And the reason why I use bittersweet is because it's actually tied to the concept of Chag Ha Matzah. Now, with the Feast of Unleavened Bread, we get two characteristics here, and actually I'm going to take us right to this verse here. This is the starting verse, which says in Exodus 12 or Shemot 12:8, says, "And they shall eat the flesh in that night, roast with fire, and unleavened bread," that's the matzah, "and with bitter herbs they shall eat it." Now notice that the word herbs here is in gray. You're not going to see this in your Bible as an actual word that's there, because it's not. They've added it. It's usually in italics or gray, which means it's something that they added to make it make sense. So the first question I will have here is this indeed, and I know the tradition is to have bitter herbs with the Passover Seder, but my question would be, is that correct? Well, this word, bitter, if we look at this word, we see that we have the Hebrew word marar. And it's really, the word that is used there is actually meror, right? And it's used in this particular verse in Exodus 12:8. It's used 3 times in the Torah, or in the Bible, and it's maror, which means a bitter. It says that it's a bitter herb or bitterness. Well, if you look at the 3 times that it's used, in particular in Exodus, where here it says with bitter herbs, the Exodus 12:8 that we just read, that's the first occurrence. But with the word herb implied, you can't use that as a proof text that it's about herbs, right? Because it would be bearing witness to itself. Essentially, you need to look at how it's used in other places. The next use of it is in Numbers 9:11, where it says, "The 14th day of the second month at even, they shall keep it and eat it with unleavened bread and bitter," right? And marar. Now, again, you can't use this to define the word, because logically the only word that's there is this maror, which is Hebrew for bitter or bitterness. So it doesn't say herb there, and it doesn't say it in the first use. So what they do in the Strongs is they will use this first section here where it says a bitter herb as to say that's how it's most often translated, and then as it goes through the various translations it'll have that. But then we get the third use of this word, which is in Lamentations 3:15, where it says, he has filled me with bitterness. That's the word right there. Maror. He has made me drunken with wormwood. So if we look at the only other use besides these two uses that we have, it's used for bitterness, not bitter herbs, with the word herb implied. Now, the reason why this matters is because if we're trying to figure out what this means, and so many people just accept things and they don't stop and actually just let the text prove the text. That's how we should be doing it. The word herbs here isn't there. So it's just simply roast with fire, right? And unleavened bread with bitterness, they shall eat it. Now, when you look at this word marar, it says it's from the Hebrew 48:43. So if we actually look at that, we'll see that the root word here is marar, a primitive root, properly to trickle, but used, as it says, only as a diminutive from Hebrew 47:51. That means to be bitter, right? To make bitter, and to be grieved, provoked, or vexed. Now, the reason why this is important is because when we're looking at this idea, and the text is important. Actually, if you do a study on the word bitterness, a lot of people, they do this Passover, and they do it with, it's this great time, and it's this big celebration. And actually, the New Testament even warns us about turning it into this meal and this feast and all of that. That's not what it's about. The fact is this is about the serious event, right? Of, if you look at the original account in Exodus 12, you're going to see that they were probably really afraid. You have the death of the lamb, and we have all this blood that is put on the doorpost, which is also identifying you as basically being rebellious to Mitzrayim. And by the way, their firstborn children are all going to be killed on this night. And now you're having a mark on your door, essentially saying, we're the ones, right? The blood is a reminder, we're the ones that brought this upon you, right? Even though obviously it was their own sin in not obeying God. But you have to understand that this is a serious event. The fact that you eat it with your loins girded, your staff in your hand, you eat it hastily, right? Because you're going to be thrust out of Mitzrayim on this night. I don't think that this was I think this was a very serious event. I think this was the culmination of this battle, right, between Paro and Yodewahe and the children of Israel. We're certainly caught in the middle. If we look at the story, we can see that the increased burden was brought upon the children, right? Paro was punishing the children of Israel for following God. And now we have this big event, the ultimate punishment, the death of the firstborn of all of the Mitzrayim. And here, all of the Hebrews, the doors are clearly marked. There's a separation that we are the children of God. And this punishment is coming upon you. This is the time of separation where they're going to be separated and go into the wilderness and leave Mitzrayim. So this idea that you will eat with unleavened bread and bitterness, or with grieving, right? That makes more sense to me than the idea of just bitter herbs. Certainly because I've said it before, that God has access to all of the words. If he wanted herbs in there, there's Hebrew words for that, and he's used them before, right? Even in Bereshit, in creation. So he has the words. He's used them before. If he wanted to say that word, he certainly could have put it in there. So why leave it out and then people add it in? Because it changes things and it creates a focus and changes a focus that, hey, we're just supposed to eat this bitter herbs. Instead of talking about the attitude that you have, and especially when you get in the New Testament, I've always thought that it never made sense to me when I see the traditions and you see how people treat Yom Kippur, you see how people treat Yom Teruah, you see how people treat Passover, right? And they treat it in this jovial kind of thing. And I think these were serious days. I don't think that these were jovial, laughter and celebration. I don't think that honors the core of these days. And I think that more importantly, here's the day where the Messiah is going to be slain. Now you tell me, do you think that any of his disciples, when he was up there on the cross, were acting jovial? Do you think that during his own Passover Seder with his disciples, when he says, this is my blood, which is shed for you, do you think any of them were like, yeah, that's going to be awesome? There's just nowhere, anywhere, that shows that this should be a time of celebration and rejoicing. And yet that's how it's often treated. So the mood actually, in the New Testament, you have multiple different places where you have warnings about how your attitude is and how you go in to Passover and how you treat it, right? Even as it says, when it says doing this as oft as you will, right? It's a warning that you do it once a year because it's tied to the suffering of Messiah, right? These are serious things. And to treat it like it's some festival meal or it's this fun time, I think it dishonors it, absolutely. And so to me, this is an important piece where I start off and look at this, that it's with bitterness, that we, do you take Messiah's sacrifice for you as something joyous? Because I know that even in Christianity, a lot of it is almost hey, did you know Jesus died for your sins? And it's like, yay, Jesus died and paid for your sins. And it's like, no, it's not yay, Jesus died. If somebody died for you, if someone took a bullet for you, you aren't clapping your hands. You aren't doing a dance. You aren't smiling. The bullet that was meant for you, the blood that you were supposed to shed, right? If someone else takes your punishment, it's not a joyous occasion. It's the same thing with the sin offering, right? This isn't a celebration. This isn't something that you rejoice over a sin offering, or that you pat yourself on the back, right? And we have verses about this in the scriptures. It's a sin offering, okay? It's a serious thing. It's a thing that you would hope wouldn't have to be done. It's being done because you sinned. The life of an innocent animal is being taken because of what you did wrong when you were the one that was supposed to receive the punishment. The wages of sin are death. You should have died, okay? And you don't rejoice when you kill the lamb or when you kill the kid of the goats in the case of the sin offering. You don't do that. You also don't partake in that, right? It's not the same as a peace offering where you can partake in it. It's a totally different thing, right? Because again, it's not a rejoicing moment. So when we think about Pesach and we think about this unleavened bread that we're eating, he said, it's my body that is broken for you. Who's clapping at that? Who's clapping that his body is going to be broke for you? I mean, he's the King of Kings. He is the Son of the living Elohim. If he is damaged in any way because of what you did, how are you rejoicing over that? That's insane to me. And so I think we have to start with these words and with these attitudes, and it puts a different understanding on what it means to celebrate this memorial with bitterness. And let's contrast this. Let's contrast this with, if we go over here and we look at matzah, right? Okay? So when I said bittersweet, it's because that's almost the opposite of bitterness. So we have here, you shall eat it with matzah. What is matzah? Right? It says, in the sense of greedily devouring for sweetness, properly sweetness, concretely sweet. That is not soured or bitter, right? So you have the opposite of the bitterness, right, with matzah, the unleavened bread. It's sweet. It has a sweetness to it, so much so that you want to devour it. Now, this is an important thing because with matzah, we have this concept of truth, right? The unleavened bread, right? Leaven is the model of sin. We hear the verses about the leaven of the Pharisees, right? And we see that this idea that we get with matzah, the unleavened bread, is this idea that we have where we have this sweetness. Because you know what it is that even though we come from this bitterness, this place, which is the whole story of the Exodus, right? You're coming out of bondage, right? The word, the original word, which this is from the Strong's, Hebrew 48:43, which is the bitterness. When we look at this will actually take us to the bondage. It says, and they made in Exodus 1:14, they made their lives bitter with hard bondage, right? So here's this root word again, marar, of bitterness, and it's being tied to the bitterness of bondage, okay? And again, it's not saying they made their lives with bitter herbs, with hard bondage. It's bitterness. It's the way they feel. It's very difficult. It is a hard thing. It is a thing that grieves you. So when we look at this idea of the truth, which is unleavened bread, right? Without the leaven of the Pharisees, when you take away all of the teachings of men and the interpretations of men, and you get to the truth, the true word of God, that's the model of Messiah. He represents the unleavened bread. That unleavened bread and that truth, when you find that truth, it's sweet, right? And even in this example, bitter herbs, as the word herbs has been added there, is an example to me actually of the leaven of the Pharisees. This is man put this word herbs in there and has changed the truth, in my opinion. They've added something, and they've added it, literally puffed up the scriptures because they added a word that wasn't there, and it's altered the meaning of it. But when you remove it and you look at the core words, what's actually written in the text, what words are there, then you'll eat it with unleavened bread and bitterness, right? The unleavened bread, it's a sweetness, but you're supposed to eat that unleavened bread with bitterness. And to me, that is the retelling of the story. It's remembering the bondage that you came from. It's remembering the serious nature of what was going on with Israel at that time. The fear also that the angel of death was going to be coming through. And you hope, you pray that you obeyed properly and got the blood properly put on the doorpost, because the angel of death was around, was outside, was looking upon your household. deciding whether it was going to come into your household. This was a serious moment and a fearful moment. And people, they just right now, they walk around like they're just got a great relationship with God. They feel like they would just walk. You don't see that, right? The beginning, the fear of Yodewahe is the beginning of wisdom. It's just the beginning. You got to start with fear. You see, Yodewahe, when he brings down, right, when he speaks to the children of Israel, he was even up on the mountain and they were set bounds up around the mountain. Were they standing up, or were they so afraid just hearing his voice they thought they were going to die? You see, there's a reverence that's called respect and fear that you're supposed to have, and that everybody throughout the scriptures who've come in contact with God, or even his messengers, were afraid to the point they thought they were going to die. That is a Passover moment. The angel of death is outside your door, and you are not sure if you are going to die or not. The Mitzrayim, right? You've marked your door, and your God just killed their firstborn. Do you think they were not afraid? We know that they were afraid. As a matter of fact, the Mitzrayim are going to chase after them, and it says they're going to be sorely afraid, right? This is a serious time. And this is this contrast of bittersweet. It's the bittersweet taste of freedom. You see, now why do people not have that fear of Yodewahe? Why have they gotten so accustomed and so comfortable that they think that they think all these things, and then they remove that? How has that been removed? You see, because you can not just see it in this verse in 12:8, you can see it in the followers of God, right? And I think what we're going to see is we're going to see that this, let's just go back to this verse here, and we're going to see in Exodus 8:1, it says, "And Yodewahe spoke unto Moshe, Go unto Paro, and say unto him, Thus saith Yodewahe, Let my people go." That's the famous phrase that everyone always talks about. The part that usually gets left out, though, is the second half of that sentence. That they may serve me. Now, why is that important? Well, we see a situation where people think that they came out of the burden, right? They were a slave, and now they're free out in the wilderness. That's how a lot of people act now. They're like, hey, free me from sin. Hey, I'm going to start following God. But then they forget the whole responsibility of servitude and being a servant. And we see this isn't the first time this has happened with Israel. Isaiah 44:21. "Remember these, O Yaakov and Yisrael, for you are my servant. I have formed you. You are my servant, O Yisrael. You shall not be forgotten of me." You see, we're a servant. But the problem with Israel, we can see in Isaiah 1:3. It says, "The ox knows his owner, and the donkey his master's crib. But Israel does not know. My people do not consider." You see, they don't know their owner. They don't know that they're a servant, right? They don't understand that they weren't freed, right, for nothing. They weren't freed to be free men. They were freed, and they were serving a master, right, that was wicked. And now that master was removed so that they could serve Yodewahe. That's why they were brought out of Mitzrayim. Let my people go, that, which is the reason why they're being let go, that they may serve me. Not that they could go free, but that they would serve Yodewahe. So if you're brought out of Mitzrayim, right, and this goes to the way a lot of people treat God. They want him to fight for them when they need something, right? Oh, Jesus, take the wheel, right? I mean, when I'm about to die in a car wreck, then I'm going to say a prayer. When my relative is sick, then I'm going to say a prayer. Please, God, save him. Please, God, save me. All the other time, They're not really talking to God, caring about his things, but when they need something, they're going to say, save me, right? And he says in the scriptures, right? Let your God save you, right? When people cry to him to say, save me, he's not going to listen. They're not following him. Right? So doing this whole prayer when you need something, blah, 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 and ignore him all the other time, you can easily see in the scriptures the pattern that is not going to be acceptable. So it's important that we understand our job is to search the scriptures, right? This is just like the matzah, right? We're looking for the unleavened bread. And we're looking for the maror, right? Or I'm sorry, the hametz. We're looking for the hametz. So here you go. I mean, the fact is that you have this crumb, and that's what we're searching for. Okay? It's just like when we search for the scriptures. Okay? We're looking for the truth, and this is the bittersweet part, right? The scriptures are our eyes that help us look at ourselves in a godly way so that we can find the crumbs in our life, right? So we can find the chametz, right? Where is the sin? Where are the things that have been added to his creation when he created you to serve him? What have we added? What has puffed us up? What has taken us away? What has moved us from being sweet, right, into something sour? How have we soured ourselves with sin? That's what we're searching out. That's why we study the scriptures. Studying the scriptures is not to find all these other things. We're looking, right? It's a mirror we're holding up against ourselves saying, where's my chametz? Where's my leaven? Where's the sourness in me? Where's the bitterness of my own sin? Where am I falling behind? Where am I failing? How can I then remove it? Like Passovers, it was funny, there was this conversation about, oh, well, what is leaven? And so many people were like, oh, it's just the leaven that you eat. You don't have to worry about other things if it's yeast, if you're not eating it, or, well, I don't want to throw stuff away. That would cost me money, and, God wouldn't want me to waste my money. My wife asked me about something. She's like, oh, hey, I think it was in our toothpaste or something. There was like some sodium bicarbonate, and she's like, oh, we had a brand new tube and another one. She's like, oh, do we want to put this in, to take this back and do all this? And it was getting close to the time, and I'm like, no, just throw it. And she's like, are you sure? And I'm like, just throw it in the garbage. You know why I threw it in the garbage? Number one, because we should have been more prepared. Okay, I don't have time to go to the store and try and return this tube of toothpaste that we had. That's my bad for not planning more. And all I saw there was, you know what? It was the disgust for all this stuff. Not, oh my gosh, is it going to cost me $4 or $5? I don't want, maybe somehow I can save it. Let's set it outside of my house, or let's do this and that because I don't want to be out $3 or $4. Who cares? What's more important to me is that I'm obeying the commandment. And I don't want that around. I want to get all of that out of my life. Is there a cost for removing sin? Yeah, you bet there's a cost. When you go in and you tell your boss, hey, I can't work on the Shabbat, there's a cost. And I've heard people say it before, oh, well, God bless me with this job and he wouldn't want me to lose it. Sorry, don't believe that at all. You're to keep the commands. If that means you lose your job, then you lose your job. Okay? People have lost their lives to keep the commandments of God. Don't kid yourself. The fact is, as it says, if you love these more than me, you're not worthy. That was about your own children. So I'm pretty sure your job is a lesser sacrifice than your children. And that's, of course, the story of Avraham, willing to give up his own child his only child, in order to obey. So I'm sorry if that makes people feel uncomfortable, but yeah, you might have to lose your job. Do you want a job that forces you to break the commandments of God? I don't. Well, what if we can't do what if what? What if it cost you something? Yeah. Throw the toothpaste away. Lose your job. Lose the things in your life. Is that your cost? Is that the cost of getting you to disobey? I mean, how much is it? What's the cost to get you away from God? Is it $15 an hour? Right? Is it a couple $1,000s a month? Is it a tube of toothpaste? I mean, what's your price? Name your price. It was funny, I was watching a TV show and the guy said, what's it going to cost me? He was a rich guy. He was telling this other guy he wanted him to do something. And he said, it's not about money. And he said, everybody has a price. What's your price? What's the cost? Because Messiah's price was everything, right? He laid down his own life to obey God. He was willing. He said, I would that this cup would be removed from me, but not my will, but thy will. He's willing to do it all. Lay down his life. Abraham's willing to lay down, the life of his son. Here's the people who came before you, right? Who've been blessed by God for their sacrifices that they've offered. You're not willing to give up a tube of toothpaste. You're not willing to give up a job because you're afraid you're not going to be provided for. Right? I mean, these are the same things that I hear, and then people act like, oh no, they look at the children of Israel came out of Mitzrayim and they say, oh, I would never be like that. They were complaining that God was trying to kill them with thirst and he wasn't going to feed them, right? Because they were following God, and yet the same exact thing happens. It says, oh, well, I'm afraid if I lose my job, what if I then get kicked out of my house and they're going to shut my lights off and our life's going to be horrible? So you don't think God's going to take care of you when you start to obey him? You think he brought you out there to kill you? You think he said, hey, do this, but it's going to mean you're going to come to total destruction because following me is total destruction? Sorry. Guys got to step up. Guys got to take a more serious stance for what you say that you believe in. So this is what it's about. We have to search out, just like you're searching for the chametz. You have to search it out. You have to remove it, right? And then you got to leave it all behind. Don't return to it, right? We hear so many people, oh, I'm going to set this outside my house, and I'm going to bring it back. I've heard that many times. Why would you want to do that? Look, it's not the concept of the time of it not being, seen with you, right? Does it mean that we're never going to eat leaven again? No, we are going to eat leaven again. So do I think that's a violation to eat leaven? No. Actually, it's showing that this is the set-apart time, the 7 days where we don't eat leaven, which by nature would mean that we're eating leaven the other time, right? So I don't think it's about, oh, well, let's just never eat leaven if it's a model of sin. But that particular leaven that you removed for the feast, I don't think I'd bring that back. Why would you want to bring? Because then you never got rid of it. That's the problem of Israel. They came out of Mitzrayim. That's the 4 cups of Passover, right? I will, bring you out of Mitzrayim. I will rid you of their bondage, right? That's after he brought them out. How could they still be in bondage after they brought them back? Because there was still some Mitzrayim in them, right? They were still lusting after and talking about the things of Mitzrayim. They still had the ways of Mitzrayim that they hadn't. So you got to remove them out of Mitzrayim, then you got to remove Mitzrayim out of them, because it needs to be a clean break. So don't go putting that stuff in your car or whatever and then bringing it back in. I feel like that's a big mistake. I think that's a parable. It's a problem with Israel. Don't repeat the sins of Israel. But they couldn't let things go. If it cost you something, great. That is an offering. Number one, if it cost you something, plan better next year. That's another lesson of Passover. Get started early, plan early, be prepared more, right? Just like with the Word of God. Live your life with Torah before you need to, before you're in the presence of God. That's the mercy that we get to practice. And every year you should be getting more prepared. If you keep running into the same problem that, wanted to do more, ran out of time, guess what's going to happen to you in your spiritual life? You're going to run out of time. You're going to be a victim of your own lack of planning. On the flip side, like I said, if it cost you something great, that's a sacrifice that you gave up because your heart is towards God and serving Him, and you're willing to take a loss. Okay? That's our attitude. It's our mindset. We got to get it right. It's just like the bitterness. It's the sweetness with the bitterness. It's the bittersweet taste of freedom. The bittersweetness is, the sweetness is the truth. The bittersweetness is that you've got bitterness and you've got sin that you've got to remove. You found the truth? Great. The truth is going to tell you something's wrong with you. The truth is going to tell you you need to clean your house. The truth is going to tell you you need to remove something, that you need to pay a cost. Right? That's the bittersweet taste of freedom and truth, right? Is that someone else, people are, it's already all done for us. It's nothing we do matters. We can't be righteous. It's Messiah's righteousness, not ours. Don't listen to that garbage. The fact is that there is a cost. Number one, you'll respect the cost that He paid, but you have your responsibility. These holy days are our piece of responsibility, our practice, that it cost us something, that we have work to do. We have our part to contribute. Yes, the blood of the Lamb, once it's on the doorpost, right, we can know that when the angel of death looks upon that blood of the Lamb, that it's going to, by the word of God, pass over us. But if we did not take that lamb, select the perfect lamb, keep it up to that point that we were supposed to kill it, apply the blood on the doorpost. If we didn't do all of that, then talking about how the blood of the lamb was going to keep the angel of death out of your house is irrelevant, because you didn't actually obey the things you needed to do in your part so that it could facilitate the other part to happen. Okay? That's a powerful lesson we have to learn. That this journey is a bittersweet journey. Right? It's even in the form of Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Passover, very serious thing. Feast of Unleavened Bread, now that's a celebration, because that's a model of that when they finally actually came out of Mitzrayim. That's like that the festival, right? The feast and the dancing and the rejoicing that they did on the other side of the Sea of Suf. When their enemies destroyed, now you can celebrate. A minute ago, you were afraid. You thought you were going to die, right? It says they were sorely afraid. He says, be still and see the salvation of Yodewaheh. Bam! Now you get over there, and it's Miriam with timbrels and singing. Don't confuse the two. Don't be singing and dancing over here when you are in danger. And understand that time to celebrate is going to come. We have our work to do. God will do His work. And that's the bittersweet taste of freedom. If you liked the video and you found that useful, don't forget to share, leave your comments. I'd love to hear your guys' feedback. Thumbs up or leave your comments. And share if you found it valuable. I appreciate all you guys. I hope you're having a great Chag Ha Matzah, and that we will continue to learn and dive into this. Hopefully I'll be doing some other videos. We got the nice wilderness of Sinai in the background, some of these pictures. Anyway, I hope you have a great Shabbat. Till next time, I'm going to say shalom.